What if I told you that there is a small piece of land in the United States where you could commit the perfect crime? Well, I'm here to tell you about that little 50 square miles strip of land where you could commit any felony and theoretically get away with it. And it's not even theory, it's for all practical intents and purposes you could. This is the story of the zone of death. And let me introduce the particulars here in order from largest to smallest. The largest entity is Yellowstone National Park, which of course, as most of you know, is largely located within the state of Wyoming. The federal government, according to the Vicinage Clause of the 6th Amendment, actually that's not even according to the Vicinage Clause, there's a different jurisdiction in which district courts are lined up to generally cover the states that they are located in. So, for example, the Federal District Court of North Dakota covers the state of North Dakota. However, the one exception is that the Federal District of Wyoming covers the entirety of Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is not entirely within the state of Wyoming. Now, a small part of it does extend northward into the state of Montana, and this is the strip that's closest to, like, say, Big Sky Ski Resort, and is towards close, put you on the road towards the city of Bozeman. However, this is not the stretch I'm talking about here. There is a very small strip in the southwestern corner of the national park that's about 50 square miles that extends into the state of Idaho. Now, the federal jurisdiction does cover the entire national park. Now let me get to the Vicinage Clause. The Vicinage Clause of the 6th Amendment guarantees that a defendant in a criminal case is allowed to be tried in the state in which the crime was committed. Now, in order to be tried for a, let's say, a felony in which you are accused of, that trial requires a jury of your peers within that jurisdiction. Now, the Yellowstone, the part of Yellowstone that is 80% of it is in Wyoming. There are definitely citizens that reside within that stretch. And so you can be impaneled by a jury of your peers there. The Montana section, same thing. Although most of it is uninhabited, there is a small settlement called West Yellowstone, which is actually where a very small commercial airport also operates. This is a settlement of about 150 residents. Impaneling a jury, while difficult and challenging, is possible here. The trick, though, is when you get to that Idaho segment with 56 square miles or so, a narrow strip of land that barely goes into the state of Idaho. This stretch of the park is uninhabited entirely. So impaneling a jury of your peers is totally and completely impossible in the Idaho segment of Yellowstone. And so, because of the Vicinage Clause, a trial cannot be held in Idaho for your crime. This is a stretch of Idaho that only has one road, dirt road, even passing through it at all. The rest of it is completely roadless and is completely uninhabited, and it has zero areas of any sort of civilization. A felony could be committed here with ease, and the perpetrators would not be able to be brought to justice for the reasons I just mentioned above. And So this area has been nicknamed the zone of death. Now, that, of course, is the worst case scenario. Other felonies that I can think of that could be committed here, you're not going to be committing property felonies here because nothing is really owned by anybody, nor did anybody have any motive to do so. But if you're talking about internet crimes, for example, if you had access to satellite internet and you committed those crimes within this stretch of Yellowstone, you could avoid federal prosecution on that particular instance. So, I mean, they talk about the zone of death, but that's not the only type of crime I'm thinking of. There are lesser felonies that could be involved, that could be committed here, particularly ones that are involving internet access, and if you have a satellite connection, and you could commit financial felonies within this zone. Pull over on the side of that small dirt road that exists, that cuts through it from east to west. It's only about maybe a couple miles long, but there's enough room there. You could pull over and theoretically commit that kind of a felony there and be possibly scot-free. Now, what that doesn't, in that particular crime, what that doesn't absolve you of is civil crimes. A civil criminal trial, a civil trial, is not impaneled a jury. That is entirely conducted by a judge. And in this case, the so-called zone of death in Yellowstone is part of Teton County, Idaho. Your civil trial in that case would be impaneled in front of a county judge for Teton County, Idaho. And you could still be felt financially liable in that particular scenario, but you cannot be imprisoned, jailed, or otherwise convicted of a felony crime in this area. So they may call it the zone of death, but I just call it simply the zone of the perfect crime, regardless of whether it's of a violent nature or not. Pretty much any felony that would make practical sense. A perfect example I could think of is if when he was alive, if he knew of this. What if Bernie Madoff traveled west from New York State and committed his various financial swindles and crimes and pyramid schemes from a laptop with a satellite uplink in this sliver of land in Idaho within Yellowstone National Park? Outside of federal jurisdiction, the business cause would mandate that he be tried in the state that he is located in, which is in Idaho, which a jury cannot be impaneled, and a crime would be impossible. Now, there have been various attempts to remedy this loophole over the years, for various reasons, including the fact that the motive and effort that it would take to commit this type of a crime are very extreme. So it's seen a lot of times by the federal government as not needing a remedy. But the biggest one that I can think of would be legislation that would take the District Court of Wyoming entirely out of jurisdiction for the entire stretch of Yellowstone and only for the Wyoming portion, and leaving the portions that spill over to the other two states in the federal jurisdiction of the district courts of those states, of Montana and Idaho, respectively. Now, before you get any ideas here on this video, if there's anybody that you just absolutely want to get rid of, I heartily do not recommend this solution. My recommendation is that you resolve that by nonviolent means. But with that said, it is legally possible, but practically very difficult. Travel to this area is very remote. We're talking about taking a series of dirt roads just to reach this area. And there are no signs that clearly demarcate it either. And so you would not know whether you're necessarily in or out of it or not. And you are, in addition to long travel, if you're talking about a financial crime, a nonviolent one, Of course, satellite uplink is never cheap, so it'd be a significant outlay on that particular front. So there it is, the zone of the perfect crime, the 50 square mile Idaho segment of Yellowstone National Park. My suggestion, of course, is don't do this. You don't want to be the one to test the law, because if you do, they're going to find a way to get you one way or the other, or at bare minimum, this loophole would eventually be closed, and you would not be able to commit the same thing twice. You know, because once one person does it, this is the federal government we're talking about here. They will close the loophole. So don't be that guy. And that is it for today. The zone where you can commit the perfect crime, the Idaho section of Yellowstone National Park. That's it for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace out, homies.